Certainly, ideal conceptions of Chinese world order would change. Eventually, there would be an end to the idea of superiority, such as those written in a poem by the Qianlong Emperor. As he wrote in 1793, "Formerly Portugal presented tribute. Now England is paying homage. My ancestors' merit and their virtue must have traveled to their distant shores. Though their tribute is commonplace, my heart approves sincerely. Curios and the boasted ingenuity of their devices I prize not. Though what they bring is meager, yet in my kindness to men from afar I make generous return, wanting to preserve my good health and my power." This is a poem written in what you can only call pompous ignorance of the growing importance of foreign trade, and indeed in particular of tea exports, to his own economy. And there was no hint whatsoever that China and Britain were about to enter into a trade based on mutual addictions. The confrontation over all of this came in the form of the so-called Opium War. What was it really about? What do you think it was really about? One interpretation says that opium was really only a proximate cause of the conflict. Without it, conflict between China and the West would still have erupted as a result of different conceptions of international relations, one more hierarchical, one at least in principle equal. Now, certainly those things mattered on the road to war, but it also mattered, and mattered crucially, I think, in terms of what happened and how we remember it, that the war was also over opium. And there are very good reasons why we still call it the Opium War. As trade developed, the British government became more and more involved and interested in China. And the reason can be summed up in one word: tea. And it happened that when British people drank tea, they liked it. And the more they drank it, the more they loved it, until the nation gradually became, how else to put it, addicted to tea. And in the 18th century, tea became the British national beverage. It became such a national drink that the average London worker spent 5% of his total household budget to purchase it, even though, as you may or may not know, tea has no nutritive value whatsoever. And so the East India Company found itself merchandising a product from the Far East which nearly everyone consumed, not just the wealthy. And as British demand for tea rose, the volume of company cargoes from China multiplied 7 times. By 1800, the company was investing £4 million a year in tea, and the China trade had become a major source of revenue for the British government, which imposed 100% excise duty on tea. And the Crown was so eager for this revenue that it required the company to store a year's supply in case the China trade was temporarily disturbed. One is tempted to think of the history of the 19th century as a history of mutual addictions. The British became addicted to tea. And you could argue that the history of the British conquest of the world in the 19th century is one in which the British were simply more awake than anyone else. Meanwhile, the Chinese were going to sleep, or at least some of them were, thanks to opium.